Good morning, I'm Justin Warmoth. After 2 months of Florida legislators debating, collaborating, and passing bills in Tallahassee, the governor is now signing them into law. This morning, State Representative Eskamani is here to talk about those laws and her thoughts after experiencing her first legislative session. Representative Eskamani, thank you so much for joining us this morning here on The Weekly.
It's awesome to be here.
Your second appearance. Last time I talked to you, you were campaigning. You have since won the election and experienced your first legislative session, which wrapped up last month. So first off, was it everything you expected? Florida's legislative session, what were your thoughts? What were your takeaways from 2019?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was what I expected, Justin, because I came in knowing that it was always going to be a fight. Mm-hmm. We have a legislative body that is very one-sided towards the majority, which is the Republican Party. It's a very top-down process as well, so it's very much what leadership wants is going to be the political agenda. But I was also really appreciative of the collegiality of the process. You know, I think we hear a lot of hyperpartisanship coming out of Congress and the White House. Tallahassee does not have that same fervor. There definitely are concerns, and there are many votes that break down on party lines. But when it comes down to
and her thoughts after experiencing her passing bills in Tallahassee.
with Justin Warmoth.
Good morning, I'm Justin Warmoth. After 2 months of Florida legislators debating, collaborating, and passing bills in Tallahassee, the governor is now signing them into law. This morning, State Representative Eskamani is here to talk about those laws and her thoughts after experiencing her first legislative session. Representative Eskamani, thank you so much for joining us this morning here on The Weekly.
It's awesome to be here.
Your second appearance. Last time I talked to you, you were campaigning. You have since won the election and experienced your first legislative session, which wrapped up last month. So first off, was it everything you expected? Florida's legislative session, what were your thoughts? What were your takeaways from 2019?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was what I expected, Justin, because I came in knowing that it was always going to be a fight. We have a legislative body that is very one-sided towards the majority, which is the Republican Party. It's a very top-down process as well, so it's very much what leadership wants is going to be the political agenda. But I was also really appreciative of the collegiality of the process. You know, I think we hear a lot of hyperpartisanship coming out of Congress and the White House. Tallahassee does not have that same fervor. There definitely are concerns, and there are many votes that break down on party lines. But when it comes down to working alongside your colleagues, there's many bills that we can support across the aisle. There's many topics that we find common ground on. And it really was a joy to work alongside some of our chairs who worked with us on budget requests and different type of social issues to help move the needle on them.
You know, that's interesting because as I was following session, that stuck out to me as well because, and I don't know if it's always been like that. I know that was your first session. I don't know if you've heard from other representatives or, you know, in the state, but is that always how it is, or is that because of maybe the cabinet that's in place now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always hear that Tallahassee tends to be more collegial, but I also think it depends on how you lead. And I'm a firm believer in building bridges when you can, but holding people accountable when you must. And so you need to be comfortable, you know, showcasing solidarity, but also calling someone in when there's a problem and calling them out if they're not listening. And that's always been my mantra, and that's how we led in Tallahassee. And I think it reflected back in how people treat us and how we were able to still, among disagreements, not be disagreeable.
Right. You know, I know some of the stuff that you'd like to see get passed did not get passed, but that was as expected. So when you think about session and you think about, you know, the realistic nature of it when you were looking at it in March before it all started, do you think Floridians are in a better place now after this session?
It's a great question. I think with the budget, a lot of positive steps were made. For example, we were able to increase arts and culture funding from $2.6 million to $21 million.
Very nice.
We did see the Affordable Housing Trust Fund still get rated, but to a lesser degree. So you had these like small moments of, okay, that's positive. And we're spending more money on water, on trying to protect our waterways. But when it came to policy, Justin, I do think Florida is not better off. I mean, we passed legislation that arms our allows teachers to be armed. We passed legislation that makes the constitutional amendment process more difficult. We passed legislation around isolated immigrant communities. We passed legislation around building new tollways that Floridians don't need and don't want. And so there were many issues that I would say actually leaves Floridians in a pretty bad place.
All 4 of those had by far the most time on the floor.
Yes.
Let's start with arming teachers. Obviously that is, you are on one side or you're on the other with that.
Yeah.
But when you hear from teachers across the state, it doesn't sound like that the grand majority of them are for that. So why would the state and its legislators pass something like that?
I mean, I agree with your point that you ask teachers, majority don't want to have the opportunity to be armed. And here in Orange County, we made the decision early on that that would never be an option for teachers, and Seminole County joined in that echo as well. My perception on why it actually passed is I don't doubt the power of organizations like the National Rifle Association in supporting those type of measures. It's unfortunate because when Parkland happened last session and the original guarding program was crafted and teachers were removed, it was promised among colleagues that teachers would never be added. And sure enough, that was one of the legislative priorities moving into this session. And I think the elephant in the room, Justin, is that our legislative body does not want to pay for actual armed professional security in our schools. And I think that's something that's worth the expense. And so I'm looking towards supporting Orange County and trying to find ways where we can actually hire a skilled officer to be on our campuses versus putting this burden and this liability on our educators.
No doubt. So the Ban Assault Weapons Now initiative, I know that was something that you and your fellow legislator here in Central Florida, your colleague, Representative Guillermo Smith, were working to get done just in session.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's something that probably won't get done with the current state of the body. But the Ban Assault Weapons Now initiative has 130,000 signatures collected, which is step one, obviously. It goes to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
There are still quite a few signatures needed. So tell us about this initiative and ultimately whether or not you think it's going to end up on the 2020 ballot and leave it up to Florida voters.
Well, time and time again, we've seen the Florida legislature fail on different issues, and then voters will step up to the plate and circumvent the legislature to get things to pass. And examples include medical cannabis, environmental conservation dollars, Amendment 4, rights restoration. So this process of a citizen ballot amendment has proven to be an alternative when legislators don't listen to constituents. And the same applies to the Ban Assault Weapons Now campaign. This is an effort to put on the ballot in 2020 the opportunity for voters to decide if they want to set limitations on what type of firearms to be sold in Florida. And I do think it's going to get on the ballot. I mean, there's a lot of passion behind this work, and those that are leading this effort are bipartisan, and they're also survivors and victims of mass shootings here in our state. And it's been really eye-opening, honestly, to see the feedback from constituents in our district around their perceptions of this type of firearm, with members of the military telling me in our district that if you want to access an assault rifle or something similar to it, then join the military. And I do think that there's bipartisan support on issues like this, and it's unfortunate the legislature won't even give the bill a fair hearing, but that's why these advocates have gone to the ground to collect petitions, and they're going to keep doing it and get this on the ballot in 2020.
And obviously, you know the fight that will be coming if it does get close to becoming a ballot initiative from the NRA. Opponents of this, obviously, they're out there. Some of the other state representatives have said that it's a move to take away rights from law-abiding citizens because of a few bad apples. What would you say to that?
I would say that there's consensus that there are certain types of firearms that shouldn't be in our streets. I mean, we already have banned rocket launchers as an example. There are types of weapons that you don't have in our streets. And there's no reason to have this type of weapon for public safety. If you're a hunter, you're not going to use this type of firearm. So we want to make sure that we respect the Second Amendment while also setting legitimate regulations to ensure public safety.
And if someone already has an assault rifle, what would be the process then?
Great question. This does not necessarily ban the existence. You would still maintain ownership. It would just ban the selling.
Okay.
And so if you're already an owner, you have that firearm in your possession. So this does not necessarily impact you.
Coming up, Representative Eskamani will discuss her goals for next year's legislative session. Plus, she'll reflect on Pulse 3 years later and the push to make the nightclub a national memorial. Keep it here.
This is The Weekly on clickorlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Welcome back. Our guest this morning is State Representative Anna Eskamani. As a Democrat, the Central Florida lawmaker had a tough time getting her bills heard during session. Of course, Florida's legislature is Republican-controlled. One bill she was hoping to pass would be historic for women's rights, not just in Florida, but nationwide. It's called the Equal Rights Amendment, and it was passed by Congress in 1972. But all these years later, the amendment still has not been ratified, and Florida is one of the 13 states that could do something about it. 37 states right now have this in place, and they voted on it, and it needs 38. So tell us about the Equal Rights Amendment and why something like this still hasn't passed, because it dates back to the 1970s.
Yeah, it's a great question. The Equal Rights Amendment has bipartisan support and has for decades. Yeah. Congress was very close to creating the environment for us to ratify this in the 70s, and since then there was a stall. And we just need one more state to make it a reality. And all the Equal Rights Amendment does is it would put in our state in our federal constitution language around no one can be discriminated on the basis of sex, which I think many folks assume already exists in our Constitution, but it doesn't. And as a result, we continue to see inequities in every sector of our lives. And Florida can make history in being the 38th state. And I was a proud co-sponsor of the Equal Rights Amendment, continue to be an advocate. And we're going to be coming back into session with even more effort on this issue, because not only is it important for every woman and girl, and I would say folks of every gender, because the language itself does not discriminate. It's for every person to be treated equally. And hopefully Florida can make history by being the 38th state.
So that is something that will be a top priority for you in 2020?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the chair of the first committee for this bill just refused to hear it. And for folks listening out there, what it really takes to get bills to pass is we have to really inspire and influence the chairs of committees.
It takes one person to let something go through.
You got it.
Or block something.
You got it. You got it. And that was the case with the ERA.
It's interesting the way we do things, but, you know, that's the way we do things. In the budget, we touched on some of the things that went through, and the budget was really, it seemed like a win for the governor. He got a lot of those proposed ideas through. Yes. $500,000, though, for a permanent, to go towards the permanent Pulse Memorial. Yeah. Obviously, that's your district. Just give me your thoughts on the third anniversary of Pulse.
Yeah, we're still healing as a community. I wear my ribbons every single day, my rainbow ribbon and my transgender ribbon, as a reflection of purpose and pain when it comes to the Pulse nightclub tragedy, where we lost 49, mostly queer, Black and brown people, and it's something that we can't forget as a community, and I've always been committed to honoring those who are no longer with us through action. And whether that's through pushing for things like the Competitive Workforce Act, which would ban discrimination for being gay in the state of Florida, or gun safety legislation, or in the case of the budget, ensuring that there are state dollars allocated towards supporting our memorial and museum, where the legislature allocated funds towards Parkland for a memorial. Nothing was allocated for Pulse. So this was a big deal for us as Central Florida lawmakers to ensure that funding would come to us. And I know that the process of building this memorial will take time. But I want to make sure the state of Florida is giving equity to these type of tragedies. And if we're going to be able to find funding for Parkland, I was really happy that we were able to find funding for Pulse.
And National Memorial seems like that's something that at the federal level they're working on. You were there this week as Congressman Soto and Congresswoman Murphy were there and announcing this plan. What significance does that hold?
It's really, it's critically important for our state. I mean, this was a local tragedy, but it was also international. I mean, I think everyone remembers how our community came together and donating blood, donating funds, but everyone around the world did. I mean, there was international support that raised over $9 million through a GoFundMe campaign that my twin sister started that gave money directly to victims and their families. And so this has become a scar in our community, but it's one that we share with people across the country, especially those who identify as LGBTQ+. And every day here in our district, we have international visitors who come to remember at Pulse. And I think ensuring that it is marked with a national recognition, and that we also ensure it's supported with funds is going to be really important to us healing through this process, but also ensuring that others can heal with us.
Let's move on now to schools. And we talked about arming teachers, and that was something you voted no on. The voucher program, where scholarship for families of 4 who make a certain amount of money, $77,000, can go to a private school using public money. You voted no on that. That went through.
Yeah, and signed by the governor.
And was signed by the governor, exactly. Why is that a big deal?
It's problematic, Justin. We know that here in the state of Florida, we have a lot of incredible traditional public schools that can be even better with our support. And unfortunately, we continue to funnel tax dollars directly to these for-profit voucher systems. And this one in particular is a 7th voucher system for Florida. And it takes money directly out of the FEFP, which is a fund that's allocating dollars towards traditional public schools. So in past cases, we've seen these type of voucher school programs actually take money from different tax buckets. Now it's directly out of a fund that is supposed to go towards our traditional public schools. And so it's problematic also in the fact that it widens the income bracket. So traditionally, those who support these efforts have talked about its impact on low-income students, but it's expanded to middle income now. So it really is a direct attack on our traditional public school systems. And I want to be clear, there are some great charter schools right here in this district. I've spoken at many that create a really intimate environment for our students, and especially those with disabilities to have an environment that can meet them and their needs. But when we're seeing this system that has no accountability and the growth of for-profit schools that benefit off them, we have a problem. And if we're not going to put accountability measures in place for these type of for-profit programs, then we need to stop funding them. And
that money could ultimately go, and we've heard it time and time again, and it's 100% true. Teachers in the state of Florida are underpaid, and that could have been allocated towards their salaries, no?
Absolutely. Florida ranks 46 out of 50 on education funding for teacher pay. And to your point, if we eliminated these tax credit programs, we could put money back towards base student allocation to support teacher raises. And the reality, too, is that the oversight to manage these programs is expensive. And it was one of the amendments that I brought forward on this bill, was to cap the amount of money that can go towards overhead, because an organization called Step Up for Students, they take a fee for every scholarship, and they're making a lot of money off the public dollar through that process. And I think that's inappropriate. And so we also, at the very least, can eliminate this overhead cost to make sure every penny goes towards a student and not towards organizations that run these programs.
It seems like following the tax dollars is something that obviously I don't always do, and I don't think the grand majority of people do that, is figuring out, okay, so my money is going towards that right there instead of funding our public schools. That's interesting.
Well, I serve on Ways and Means. I'm the youngest member on Ways and Means. I'm one of 2 freshmen, and I take that role really seriously. And I've dived deep into the world of Florida's taxes, and I've been calling out different corporate loopholes, even Florida's tax package that we pass. So every year we pass a tax package for all Floridians, and we pass a corporate tax package. The corporate tax package gave away about $368 million to corporations that are saving money through the federal tax reform package. Now they're going to be saving even more money while Florida loses. And then on the tax package for everyday Floridians, you do have your sales tax holidays, which are positive. But you also have a tax exemption that was heavily advocated for by major corporations, including our telecom groups, including our tourism groups. And so, again, you have to be really critical about taxes here in Florida, because that's our main source of revenue is sales tax. And so when anyone is trying to exempt themselves from the process, that's going to be the voters who end up suffering at the end.
And my thanks to Representative Eskamani for stopping by this morning. For more information on the topics discussed, head to clickorlando.com/weekly. I'm Justin Warmoth. Have a great Sunday and happy Father's Day.